Welcome to Programming Paradigms. It's really great to have you all on the module this year. I'm Graham, one of the lecturers for the module, and you'll be hearing from Jason a little bit later on. So what we're going to be doing today is a couple of things. We're going to give you a quick overview of the module, kind of what it's about and how it will be assessed and so on. And then we're going to move over to give you a couple of demos of the two paradigms which you'll be learning about in this module. But we're going to start off first of all with a little bit of fun. It's a little exercise which you can try in your own time. And the exercise is to write down all the languages that you've ever written a program in. So the idea is you just take out a piece of paper and you write down all the languages you've ever written a program in. It doesn't matter whether it's 5 lines or 5,000 lines, just write down all the languages, and it's interesting to see how many of them you have and what kind of paradigms they are, whether they're imperative, functional, object-oriented, and so on. So when Jason and I do this, we have been programming for an awfully long time now, and we tend to have about 20 programming languages each. And the kinds of languages we have are actually quite different. Jason tends to have more imperative and object-oriented styles of languages, and I tend to have the more kind of functional languages. So interesting exercise, try it for yourself, compare with your friends and see how many programming languages you have ever used in the past. So the background to the module is that in programming and algorithms in semester 1, you learn the basics of imperative programming in C. And what I'd like to do for the next minute or two is just run through some of the things which you learned about in that module. So first of all, you learned about variables and assignments, and this is really the hallmark of imperative programming. So in imperative programming, it's a state-based paradigm. Changing the value of stored variables using assignment statements is the main thing that you do. You've also learned about some basic control structures. So you've learned about conditionals, various forms of loops, while loops, for loops, and so on. You've learned about some basic data structures. In particular, you've learned about programming with arrays. And then as the course progresses, you've come on to some more advanced features of C. And in particular, you've been learning about defining and using your own functions and also different parameter passing mechanisms. So you've been learning about call by value and call by reference. And then towards the end of the course, you've been learning about pointers and memory management, which is really one of the important aspects of programming in a low-level imperative programming language such as C. So what we're going to be doing in this module is learning the basics of two other programming paradigms. So Jason on the left is going to be teaching you the basics of imperative programming in Java, and Graham on the right, that's me, I'm going to be teaching you the basics of functional programming in Haskell. So Java is one of the main object-oriented languages, Haskell is one of the main functional programming languages, and we're going to be giving you an introduction to these two different programming paradigms. So now I'd like to spend a few minutes giving you some practical information about what you can expect from the module and how it's going to be run. So first of all, in terms of lectures, we've got 4 one-hour lectures per week, and further details about these you can find on the Moodle page. And you'll see that there's going to be various different formats of the lectures. Some of them will be live lectures, some of them will be video lectures, some of them will be coding sessions, some of them will be exercises, and so on. There's various different kinds of ways that we're going to be teaching you the two paradigms in this module. In terms of labs, there's going to be 1 2-hour lab per week. It'll be 1 hour for Haskell and 1 hour for Java, depending on how we've set things up that particular week. And in particular, you can get help with the exercises, which we set you, and the coursework in the lab sessions. And the labs will all be attended by me and Jason, and we'll have a number of expert helpers in the lab who can help you out with anything you want to do with the exercises or the coursework, or really anything to do with the module. In terms of course materials, everything that you need for for the module is going to be made available for you on the Moodle page. So all the resources that you're going to need for the module will be there. So you'll be able to find the slides for each of the lectures, and we'll always put these up in advance of the classes. You'll find all the video recordings from each lecture, you'll find the coursework, and you'll find some exam information later on in the course. Everything which you need for the module is going to be given to you on the Moodle page. So please make sure you're keeping up to date with this every week as the course progresses. So in addition to the course materials, Jason and I would also like to recommend one textbook for each paradigm. So on the left, for Java, Jason has recommended Java How to Program, and in particular the yellow 8th edition. But what he tells me is that you probably won't need any textbook. There's lots of information available online if you want to do some extra reading around the Java paradigm. And also, if you do all the Java exercises, then you'll be just fine. So you don't need a Java book, but if you wish to have one, this is the one that Jason would recommend. So on the right, the blue book, Programming in Haskell, that's written by me, and this is absolutely not essential. But if you did want to do some extra background reading, this is obviously the one which I'm going to recommend. It is actually the book of the course. So the book was written specifically to support the Haskell teaching, which I do in the first year, and the advanced functional programming teaching I do in the second year. But again, just as with the Java book, you do not need it at all. We give you everything you need for the module, but if you wish to do some additional reading, you can have a look at this. And there's about 20 copies of the Haskell book available in the library. Finally, from me here, I'd like to talk very briefly about how the module will be assessed. So first of all, there's going to be some Java coursework, which will count for 20%, and Jason can tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. Secondly, there's going to be some Haskell coursework, which will also count for 20%. And the way I'm going to structure this is there'll be a series of very short, probably one-page exercise sheets in the first few weeks, just to get you into the basic things which I'm going to be teaching you. And then there'll be one larger Haskell coursework towards the end of the module. And finally, in terms of examination, there's going to be a written examination, which counts for 60%, and we will tell you more about that later on in the module, and also give you some information about that on the module Moodle page. And just to wrap things up from me here, just remember, if you need help with anything in the course, and in particular with the coursework and the exercises, you can get help from me and Jason and the additional lab helpers in the weekly labs.